Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the wonderful Boyd Holbrook to talk all about his current projects, the movie Vengeance, as well as the Netflix series, The Sandman. And starting with The Sandman, I wanted to talk a little bit about your character development, because I always think it's such an interesting journey to take a character that is kind of another world and of another space, but yet the journey of kind of figuring out the mentality is still very similar in a lot of ways. And I've heard you mention that with the Corinthian, obviously, he's a huge outsider and someone who's kind of never really fit into spaces around himself. And I was interested if something like that was a really great inroad for finding the emotional landscape and starting to figure out how you wanted to play him, or where the first kind of roads into his emotional complexities were for you.
Yeah, well, in the Sandman, the Dollhouse, I believe, is the first issue and the only issue that the Corinthian is in. And so, when I knew this was going to be, 10 episodes, there was a lot of that. It's like, well, really, what is this guy? And I think that's really the greatest part about acting that I enjoy, is that you get to psychologically break these people down. Because on first interpretation, this guy is the creation of your worst nightmare in the dreaming world, and in the waking world, he is this patron of saints to a group of serial killers. So how does he become all that? He's not a character that I found that would do a home intrusion. It would be more of, you welcomed him into your home, and that was your fatal mistake. And a person who has been around for such a long time has really taken all the low-hanging fruit. So he's become a bit of a connoisseur over time. So all those things started informing, what does this guy wear? He's become a connoisseur, he's a sommelier. He's really after the finer things in life because he's gone through all that. And that informs, speech and sophistication and how he carries himself. So yeah, really a deep well just to kind of keep going back to and try to figure out this character.
And you're mentioning there, obviously, he's a character who has been alive for such an extensive amount of time. And did that change at all the way that you were thinking about your character's backstory and history in terms of the amount of detail that you wanted to go into? Or was it more just thinking about what would be certain influential moments in his life regardless?
Yeah, I think the time span of that duration that he's been around, he's seen everything. He's seen it all, done it all. So with that as a sort of, a sense of humor that he can play with people. Everything's not so serious with him. He has a sense of humor along with all of the things that he's seen. So all that just really informed him, rather than, playing one note the whole time. That's a big fear for me, I guess.
And you were bringing up before as well that one of the aspects as well is obviously how he speaks, and there's such a deliberate delivery in every word. It feels like is so kind of meticulously thought out for him. What was that journey of really figuring out the voice of this character and the specific delivery that you wanted for the dialogue?
Yeah, really good writing has phrasing in it. Usually, not every character sounds the same. There's a different phrasing in how the clip and the cadence comes out. And I like to have a lot of time. I would love to have, much more time than you usually get. But it's because you literally have to go through space and time to something to go from being foreign to existing. It's just existing. I am it. I'm not trying to be it. So the longer you can have, the more time you have to see that and to see the hidden language that's on the page. And I'm from Kentucky, so voice is a big thing for me. Not because I'm from Kentucky, but just because of I've had done so much voice work in school that I just now always start with, how does this character sound? and all the things we've spoken about just now really inform that, the intellect of a character, where they're from, all that. So yeah, the voice really for me is kind of root one, and then breaking down why they operate, how they are conditioned, what makes them that way, how they have their point of view, because that's the reason why I want to do it. I want to find out someone else's point of view and take that on as mine.
And with that sense of physicality in the character as well, because again, it's every movement is very meticulous as well with this character, and it feels like he's someone who's trying not to give too much of himself away to anyone. Like there's a lot of mystique and mystery in any interactions for the first time. Is that something where you play around with the physicality of a character and kind of explore that before you go into filming, or is a lot of that discovery once you're filming scenes in the character?
Yeah, I think every actor would like to say, yeah, I figured it all out before we got there. Yeah, I really do. I really try to. But you have to perform and get up and do this. So you're going to be learning things along the way of how you're just going to get these sort of clues throughout a scene and throughout the experience. The glasses really became like wearing a mask. For me, it was simple and just very, very. It really had a big impact. I could tell because people, people can't read you. So yeah, I really relied on that sort of just small transformative thing.
Right. And one of the initial hesitations in taking the role was that idea of a role where you don't have the use of your eyes, because that's so much something that you utilize as an actor. And even just in terms of the way that you interact with scene partners, that's a huge connective point as well. And after you talked to Alan Heinberg, the showrunner, how did you kind of figure out the approach and how you were going to go into it, and having to think about the rest of your face and the rest of your body in a very different way, and having to lean on that expressively in a way that you may not have if you'd had the use of your full face and your eyes?
I went through all that. Yeah. That was a big hang up for me to do it, was the conversations with Alan. It was, I don't know, but he doesn't have any eyes. So how is this going to work? Because, it's that old saying, the soul is in the eyes, and it is. So he reassured me, but hey, that other role you played, you were wearing glasses and that, it seemed to work pretty well. And what I thought was really going to be a hindrance became almost like a one-up power that I had, that sort of became like a mask. Behind the mask really just allowed me to flow. And I did go through, well, maybe I should talk with my mouth more. You go through all these things at the beginning, and just through rehearsal time, it starts becoming just second nature.
And when it comes to, when we first see violence enacted in a moment during the episode with the serial convention, did you and Alan talk about what that would look like as well? Because again, it's kind of very slow and methodical. It's not something where he goes straight in with aggression, which I thought was such an interesting trait that really matches the personality and persona that you've built for the character up to that point.
Yeah, that's something that terminology I learned along the way researching this, is that there's process killing, and then the act, like getting adrenaline high from doing something like that, to maybe more like a Jeffrey Dahmer type, where it's like, I'm going to keep this person because it's giving me some sort of life force. So the setup, the stalking, the prey, is all really a part of it, but it has to be done so well. There's a step-by-step process to it for it to be the ultimate delayed gratification. So again, going back to that refined character.
And that episode's also really great in the fact that we then get to see your character in a completely different environment where he's there as a keynote speaker. He's kind of lauded by this community. And, so there's this kind of fandom around him when he moves around the space and walks into a room. And for you, what was the impact that has on him? Going back to what you were talking about right at the beginning of he's always an outsider, but this is a space where he's actually not and everybody's revering him.
Yeah, no, I just got a little chilly. It's that thing of being idolized and welcomed when you've been sort of an outcast for so long. Just that fulfillment of finally somebody understands what I've been talking about. And it's a really clever way that they've done it, to sort of take the Corinthians arc and sort of finally push it into that light. And you get to see all those characters at the convention. And it's just really, really cool.
It is. And, one of the trajectories with him as a character as well is that idea that, he can't be in the waking world forever. There's an end date to it. And so you're playing this character who has this idea of this life that he wants, but it's never fully tangible to him. And so how did that create some of the emotional landscape for him for you?
Yeah, I felt the same way. There's a ticking clock over my head that I'm eventually going to have to meet my maker. And so with that, I saw a character that had a new lease on life. The cell door had been open after you've been told you're going to spend life in prison, and you're free. So there's an aspect where he's just trying to really suck every drop of satisfaction out of life as he can before time's up. So for all the stuff on page, as a terrible person, he's really loving every second.
And obviously there's the dynamic between the Corinthian and Dream played by Tom Sturridge as well. And there's that moment right at the beginning where, Tom Sturridge is kind of trying to take that away from him. And then he ends up locked away for 100 years. So he gets this buy of extra time, but it's very much the two of you circling each other, but not in the same physical space. And so how did you think about the way that you wanted to manifest that dynamic, even though it's not about the two of you being on screen together for most of the season?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I do know that I'm a real thorn in his side, and it creates a certain sense of urgency that at any time this could happen. So I knew that Morpheus was always sort of looming somehow, and really. It's again really clever, great writing of how we just bottleneck at the end. It's just building that anticipation of when these two will finally meet and what will happen. So, I tried to give Tom his space, and that was pretty easy because we were all basically in hazmat suits shooting this during the pandemic.
I also wanted to ask you a little bit about Terry Knickerbocker, because I've heard you mention Terry as an acting coach that you've worked with, and, was interested if you were working with Terry on the Sandman and Vengeance. And if so, what were the aspects of character that working with an acting coach, even at this point in your career, really helped to bring out for you?
Yeah, I worked with Terry on every single project. I don't see it as I need help with acting. I see it as acting is a two-way street. I need literally another person to act with. It's a team sport. So having a person like Terry, who's just a library of all plays everything and runs a studio and sees work from beginning to all the other great actors that he works with. We have just a real deep friendship. He's a mentor to me. I can always try out things and get his perspective, be able to work it out rather than working with a stranger or rehearsing in my bedroom and then getting to set and not having the experience of what another person will bring to the table. So we work together on everything. I will continue to do that. I tape our sessions, and I pop them in my earphones, and I do everything while I'm listening to these. So it becomes, again, that really second nature thing, because rehearse, just keep doing it. Terry's fantastic. I've worked with him for a long time, and he always brings something I've never thought about to our sessions.
Yeah, that's amazing. And in talking about the movie Vengeance as well, you were mentioning with the Sandman how the voice of a character is kind of the initial thing that you start to develop. And so similarly for Vengeance, was that where you started out with building out this character? Because obviously it's a very different type of vocal delivery. It's a much more warm and open character than playing the Corinthian.
Which was a relief to drop that and to be just somebody who was a big-hearted person and super impulsive to his detriment, probably sometimes. But yeah, he's from West Texas, so that's a very different type of atatomic person who behaves really different from someone like the Corinthian. I say this. I think it takes a village to produce a film where you're the character. So I love working with voice coaches. I work with a guy named Gary Grinnell out of Ireland, who's done just great work. And it's again, someone to have a sounding board against, rather than going down some rabbit hole and maybe going off in a wrong direction and then getting to set and you've really gone the wrong way. So just having perspective, and because at the end of the day, I have to get up and do this. It has to be mine. So it's always going to be mine. But to have people around you that can support you, and also break things down with software and get phonetic notes for your script. That stuff for me is just like the fundamentals that every time I can always go back to those fundamentals, and then the film itself will take on its life.
I really love that. And, also with this character as well, he's very fluid with his body language. He's a much kind of looser character as well. And so again, in kind of finding that physicality and finding the movement of the character, what were the important aspects of his mannerisms, or just that being very comfortable and very tactile with people that you wanted to bring to him?
Yeah, he's just an expressive person. So physically, I wanted him to just wear his heart on his sleeve. And in comparison to someone like the Corinthian, there's a more refined coldness to that. So there's, just like in physics, warmth expands things and coldness draws things in. I really just try to keep it simple, stupid sometimes, and just apply the necessities.
And they're both characters that in different ways are very charming. The Corinthian, like you said, is someone that kind of wants you to lure you into, you've already invited them into your home before you realize that you shouldn't have. And, then with Ty and Vengeance, it's this like just immediate warmth and openness. And he's so charming and engaging because of that. And so how did you approach that kind of charisma that you wanted to bring to two very different characters in very different ways?
I just realized that I've welcomed BJ's character Ben into our home, and it was too late before he knew it as well. But in a totally different scenario. Each is different, but Ty has got a very strong sense of something that's happened to his sister, and he almost views Ben as this unicorn that's from a place where it breeds intelligent people that must be able to find out what's happened. And the really great thing about the writing in Vengeance is that it takes these idiosyncrasies that you think will be a cliche of someone from the South that, or country hayseeds or something like that. And it turns out it's actually those people who teach Ben something. So there's just a really different variety between the two, but they were both had a certain amount of charm. But I think that's just who Ty is. He's not, and the Corinthian is very manipulative and very conscious of doing that, and Ty is just unconscious, obliviously a loving, warm person.
I also like the fact that with Ty, you very intentionally, you didn't want to play him as kind of this very macho character, kind of a patriarchal figure of the family, and there is a moment where we see him hit someone, but we really understand the emotion of where that came from. And so how did you find that really delicate balance of playing someone that, isn't afraid to kind of stand up for things and can be pushed to that place, but that's not the core of who they are within their everyday life? Because it's interesting to see both of those elements coexist.
Yeah, again, it started out what it wasn't in the end. Starting out, more of a caricature of someone down there who must be rough and tough because they have, they live out in the middle of nowhere and they're Texas and all that. And then through the writing, you just start analyzing and seeing that this is a person who just wants the best for everybody. And so the two don't really go together. And so it was more of a physicality thing in the beginning with a stronger dialect and the rehearsal with BJ and stuff like that, trying to stay in like a very strong West Texas accent didn't really lend itself to the comedy because I think what I initially started out doing was a bit more heavier, and it just didn't work for the lightness and the comedy and the timing. So you have to fail to figure this stuff out, which I'm getting pretty good at figuring.
And in terms of the comedy as well, BJ Novak actually gave you a book at the beginning, which was like Truth in Comedy, I think. And it sounds like a lot of that stemmed conversations about, having this very grounded comedy where you're not playing it for the jokes. And I know that comedy's a space that you've worked in a little bit less throughout your career, and is something that you've been really keen to kind of dip your toes into further. And so what was that journey and exploration of kind of stepping into it in that sort of space, finding these very grounded, intimate character moments to bring forth the elements of comedy with someone like BJ Novak, who you also had a pre-existing, dynamic with from him directing an episode of The Premise?
Yeah. I mean, BJ is wildly talented, and I'm so happy to work with him early because he is going to go and do some great things. He gave me that book because I just think he's really smart in knowing that there's a pressure to be funny, or you've got to make that happen yourself. And really, that's a trap. That's something that he was kind of foreseeing for me, or for that he's seen in the past. So that book really just helps you and puts you at ease because it's, it's from the guys from Second City and all those people who, Chris Farley and all those people who came out, those people who studied with. But for an example would be, there's a joke in the truck about a movie that I recognize him from. And it's like laugh out loud funny on the page. But so it's funny, but then playing in the scene, it wasn't really working because I was so aware that it was funny and it was a joke. But that's not the joke. The joke is that I genuinely think that, and that's why it's funny. And so we had to find the timing and the pouncing and the punctuation on it for it to, oh, that's what it is, you know. But it derives from a place that's just a genuine statement rather than, oh, this is going to be funny if I say that.
Well, these are both such fantastic projects. And I think just a continued example of how with every project you always manage to find such new spaces to explore as an actor for audiences. So thank you so much for talking about both of these. Really appreciate it, Boyd.
Thanks, Mara. It was a pleasure.